So, welcome everyone to our first Open Innovation in Scottish Local Government webinar. Today our project leads are presenting, and that is Colin Birchenall. He is Chief Technology Officer for the Digital Office and also Chief Digital Officer for Glasgow City Council. We're also joined by Sally Kerr, Digital Innovation Manager for the City of Edinburgh Council. We also have two guests on today who will be sharing their experiences of innovation, and that is Mollie Kerr from the City of Edinburgh Council and also John Campbell from Glasgow City Council. So just a couple of things before we pass over to the presenters. Today will be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel, so you can share with your colleagues and access at a later date. And also we will encourage everyone to ask questions throughout the webinar today, and they will be picked up in our Q&A session later on in the presentation. So without further ado, we will pass on to Colin Birchenall, who will start the presentation, and we hope you enjoy our webinar today.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining in on our Open Innovation webinar this afternoon. As many of you may know, if you've seen me present, this is a topic that really gets me excited. And when I presented at the recent partnership forum, there was a lot of interest from the people who attended that to find out more. So this is a start, really. This is a three-part series that will provide an overview based upon the experience of Glasgow and Edinburgh, who've been involved in a programme that's been run from Scottish Enterprise to build capability and processes to enable open innovation. So what we thought was, to start building the community around open innovation, start sharing experience. We would start off by just holding a few webinars to raise your awareness of what Glasgow and Edinburgh have been up to. So this first webinar will focus on the general learning from both Glasgow and Edinburgh, and Mollie and John will talk us through that in a while. And then we'll follow up with dedicated webinars, one focused on Glasgow's experience and one focused on Edinburgh's experience. And that will give you exposure to some of the practical experience gained by the two councils in terms of the processes, the environments, procurement, and these sorts of topics, and also the value that it's brought, and also some of the challenges that you'll need to consider in adopting this approach as well. So just in terms of the running order for today, I'll provide a general introduction on open innovation. I'm going to use some slides I've used previously, and if you've seen it before, it'll act as a good reminder. If you haven't, hopefully it's a good introduction. And then I'll hand over to Mollie, who'll share some of the Edinburgh experience of the Open Innovation Programme with Scottish Enterprise. Then I'll hand over to John to give the Glasgow perspective. And then, as Siobhan said, we will then have a question and answer session, because I'm sure that during the presentation you'll have a lot of questions, so we'll make sure that we leave sufficient time to give you the opportunity to get some answers to some of those questions if we can. And then I'll hand over to Sally, who'll summarise the webinar and talk through the next steps. So as I said, open innovation is a topic that really gets me excited. It's one of a suite of new methods and capabilities that we are promoting through the Digital Office's Digital Leadership programme alongside service design and agile development. And what we want to do with the Open Innovation project that Sally and I are leading on is to raise awareness across the sector of open innovation and also just general innovation approaches and tools. We want to improve the understanding of the routes to innovation in Scotland, and I think it's fair to say that Scotland's quite blessed with some great organisations that can help with innovation. We have the likes of Civic in Scottish Government. We have access to Can-Do from Scottish Enterprise. There's the innovation centres like Data Lab, Census, Digital Health and Care Institute. So we're going to try and start to map all of that out, because we know it can be a bit complex to understand how all of those things fit together. Importantly, what we want to do is to build, like our other projects, we want to build communities of interest around open innovation, begin to create a sense of community online, but also through meetups and events as well. And all this will be a 3-part series webinar. We expect that we'll be delivering more subsequently as well. We want to build capacity for open innovation, so we want to look at what skills do we need, what processes, etc. And in line with the other methods like service design and agile, we'll be looking to establish a playbook that helps people understand why they should be embracing open innovation and what they need to do to deliver it. And one of the benefits of collaborating, of course, will be to identify some common shared challenges across the sector that we can collaborate on, but also provide more interest out of for the private sector to engage with us as well, because instantly we can demonstrate a Scottish-wide market rather than just a regional one. So, as I say, apologies if you've seen these slides before. I'm just trying to provide a very quick overview of what we mean by open innovation, and I'm going to start by talking about closed innovation. And that's how we operate typically now, is that in order to come up with new ideas, our approach to that is we hire staff to be experts and for them to come up with the idea. So we've got challenges within our the communities we serve, whether it's health and well-being, whether it's environment, whatever it might be, and we hire staff to come up with the solutions to those problems. But those challenges are getting more and more sophisticated, and the types of solutions that are available to address those are similarly becoming quite sophisticated. But what we've got internally within our organisations is finite capacity and finite knowledge. So the way that we tend to engage in a closed innovation process is our experts, our staff will come up with a statement of requirements. They'll try to document their interpretation of how we'll solve the problem, and they'll write a big detailed statement of requirements that will follow a procurement process to engage with people from outside of our organisation, typically the private sector. Okay, so that's a closed innovation process. With open innovation, rather than rely on your internal staff to come up with the ideas, you provide more opportunity for the broader external community to come up with ideas by creating a shared understanding of your challenges. So rather than internally take a challenge, solutionize that, come up with a solution, then interpret that by creating a statement of requirements and going to market, we just share the challenge. Okay, that gives us access to a larger community of experts, a community of experts that maybe have a different perspective, can look at things differently, and can generate more ideas for how we might tackle those challenges. And it also gives us greater capacity, and it gives us greater knowledge. That's an open innovation process as opposed to a closed innovation process in summary. Some examples of where this is being applied on a global scale, and I will emphasise that open innovation is a growing trend. We're seeing more and more organisations, large and small, adopt this approach. So some examples of this that often get quoted are General Electric, Lego and NASA, some quite diverse use cases there, in fact. So, if you go to these organizations' websites, if you Googled their names and open innovation, you'd probably find a website that has a list of the challenges that they have open at the moment. So on General Electric's website, they've got a challenge out. How do we solve water scarcity? How to create better eco-friendly management of water resources? So, Lego, people are innovating with Lego, the nature of their product, but they've really embraced that and allow their users, the Lego users, to come up with new ideas that they'll then productize. So for example, at the moment, they're inviting people to come up with designs for James Bond, Lego designs, etc. And the interesting case study I find, though, is NASA. I mean, you kind of expect that NASA, have a huge budget and they employ lots of scientists and engineers, some of the best minds they can get access to, and that's right. But even with that, they recognize they don't have the capacity to solve the challenges that they face as an organization. So, they open up challenges of different scales to scientists and engineers and companies around the world. The one that's on their website at the moment it simply says, find all asteroid threats to the human population and find out what to do with them. It's big challenges. Bringing that back to local government, a few councils have started to open up challenges, either through the likes of the Can Do Challenge with Scottish Enterprise or Civic through Scottish Government. So here's some examples of the challenges for both Glasgow and Edinburgh that won the webinar today, but also Stirling as well. So not quite the trying to identify all the asteroid threats to the world, but very big challenges that we all face as local government, etc. One of the benefits of open innovation is that it creates a mutual benefit between us as public sector providers and the communities that we support, and any business, typically an SME, that we engage with through an open innovation process. For us, what it does is it provides access to the skills, the experience, and the intellect of those SMEs and their different perspectives that they can bring, and we can apply that to challenges that we face, such as the three I just gave examples of. But so it can help us to realise benefits in terms of quality of life, health and well-being, the types of outcomes that we look to deliver upon. For the SME, of course, what it does is it gives access, greater access to the public sector to co-design, co-produce products and services alongside the public sector that they could then develop and grow their market share with, because of the experience that they gain. Where the SME is local, there's a mutual benefit in terms of that can then provide an economic return to that business that also provides an economic return for the local economy as well. So I'm gonna hand over now, because that's some of the theory. I'm going to hand over to Mollie and John to talk about their experience through the Scottish Centre. So at this point, I'll hand over to Mollie.
Hi everybody. My name is Mollie Kerr. I'm the Commercial Innovation and Engagement Officer for City of Edinburgh Council, and I worked on the Scottish Enterprise Open Innovation Programme in the first 2 years, and I'm still with it for the final 2. So the Open Innovation Programme, just a bit of an overview for you. There were 12 or 13, I think 13 at the finish up cohort partners. We had Strathclyde University academics as our partners. We were given funding to support implementation and adoption of new approaches. The remit was to build organisational capacity and capability, maximise the economic impact and support SMEs to deliver as first and second tier suppliers. So to do all of that, we were part of quarterly cohort meetings, which lasted over 2 days. We had various academic guests each quarter who ranged from academics from Cork University, from Zeppelin University in Europe, to Steve Radar from NASA. We had someone over from GE as well. So that gave us an opportunity to learn from their experience, processes, tools, and build up enough confidence to go off and start taking part in open innovation challenges ourselves and being more successful because we understood how they really should be conducted. Bit on outcomes from that programme. So we were looking to understand the benefit of open innovation and be able to articulate that to our audience, so internal sort of commercial leadership team, senior management team. As I say, we learnt new skills. The most fundamental thing you have to learn, and it was the very first thing we did in the workshop, was you get given a bit of a problem. You do not run away and find a solution, and that's exactly what everybody did. There was about 50 of us in the room. You have to define the problem first, and even when you set off to actually do that, you will still run off and come back with solutions and then realise, oh no, that's not what I was supposed to be doing. Because that's the whole point of open innovation, is to go out and ask your crowd, whether it be internal, external, particular marketplace, what they think the solutions should be. Landscaping is an excellent process that we used, and it takes you through a series of steps to really understand what your problem is, where you can find the right information, where you might get your solutions from, and establish if there's something already out there in the marketplace, which quite often there can be. Deep diving was part of that landscaping process. Supplier engagement, as procurement professionals, we're reasonably good at that, but we don't realise how poor we actually are until you start doing it on an innovation front and having to have that level of conversation. And then getting to challenge launch and how to launch the challenges properly. Within the 12 cohort members, there were 3 public sector and the rest were private, and it was very geared initially to the private sector, but recognition was given very quickly that within public sector we have very set procurement regulations that we have to follow. There is an innovation partnership procurement process, but nobody's used it in the UK, although it's been used extensively in Europe. So it was also about developing what that process should look like, and how we could procure innovation compliantly. Quite a bit around implementation, so not implementation of challenge solutions, but actually implementing any form of innovation in your organisation and how you should really go about that and what the key important steps are. And ultimately, the main outcome for Scottish Enterprise was supporting Scottish SMEs, which again is very difficult under our procurement regulations, but there's ways and means of doing that, and certainly we've accomplished that to date. So you're looking at a slide now around the sort of innovations approach, the kind of core process that we followed, and the support blocks that kind of, underpin that. So you have to have a strategy as to what it is that you're trying to do in your organisation, how you're going to do the ideation part, how you're going to get problems to solve, how are you going to really define them ready to go out to market? Then how are you going to do that research and development and the testing? And then how you're going to deploy your end solution. And for Scottish Government, that's been a bit of a bugbear, as that there isn't always significant contract awards at the end of innovation projects where a supplier's gone off and got a lot of business and has something that is scalable that they can go off and sell elsewhere and in other industries or to other organisations. So the deployment and the SME growth at the end is hugely important. The support blocks, it's all there. So knowledge management, culture. You've got to have the right culture or you're not going to succeed. The governance is hugely important, so everybody knows what they're signing up to right at the very beginning, and certainly our successful projects are ones where we've really, gone to town on that. Having the procurement process in place and also the funding to do it if you need funding. Next slide, open innovation process. So just a few of the pieces of that jigsaw. So problem definition, I can't go on about enough. It's an interesting workshop to do. What's your problem? What do you think it is? And you can finish up with something completely different when you actually delve into it all. Landscaping, I mentioned before, it is a series of steps and questioning your own logic and process. Only takes about a couple of hours, but it means what you then have is what your real problem is and any work that you need to do before you go to market. And it often identifies if there's existing solutions or not. And never underestimate the power of Google in your fact finding. If you don't do enough basic digging around at the beginning, you just never know what you're going to get at the end. And you could spend an awful lot of time and finish up with a solution that's been on the market for 2 or 3 years, and you really should have found it on page 2 of Google. Procurement process is hugely, as I mentioned, is legislative. We can't get away from it. So it's very important that we source the right solutions. The evaluation and selection criteria, etc., are all, robust and appropriate. We are currently working with Gary Robinson from Scottish Government and some of our own procurement colleagues to go through an innovation partnership process and develop all the documentation with legal support from Scottish Enterprise, Terry Hogg and the Can Do Fund. So we're involved in that piece there to develop essentially the innovation partnership procurement journey, along with a suite of documentation, template tender, evaluation, terms and conditions, etc. And there'll be a lot of lessons learned out of that as well, I'm sure. So that'll be a kind of pathway that our colleagues in public sector could choose to use and follow. And again, implementing your contract is making sure that your team in your service area actually want it at the end. And it's about taking them on that journey with you as well. So making sure you have an action plan for that and how to mobilise it post-award onwards. And also typically as an exit plan, should you wish to move forward with new technology next time around, you might want to do the whole thing again. So experiences for me, some of these are a little bit lessons learned, so get senior management buy-in now before you start. Experience from the biggest academics and companies in the world, that is, I can't tell you how valuable that's been for us. And hearing what they've gone through and how they now work and what they're able to achieve has been hugely helpful. And along with some of the sort of the innovation processes, especially sort of stage gateway type processes, which is what we're using now, has been immensely valuable. I mentioned the business case earlier. I would absolutely treat it as a dirty big procurement that you want to be really mindful of and get that business case written and signed off by everybody. And our successful projects have absolutely done that. So define the problem, landscape it, what's already out there. We have the experience of being able to do that. Process and gateways are great. We're not frightened of them. We love a good process, and we've developed our own now as well, a bit more bespoke to how we function here. And we have a library of documentation and are building a library of documentation for a wider audience, as I say, through Scottish Procurement Directorate. And importantly, we gained a lot of confidence that we have learnt a lot and know what we are trying to achieve. And hopefully that's helpful. I'm going to hand over now to John Campbell from Glasgow, who's been on the Scottish Enterprise Open Innovation Programme as well.
Good afternoon, folks. My name is John Campbell and I am a Development Officer within Glasgow City Council. I've been working or involved in Glasgow's involvement with the Open Innovation Programme now for the past 2 years. Having worked within the public sector for over 15 years, prior to joining the programme, I could probably count in one hand how many times I'd actually heard the word innovation. So for me, having the opportunity to get involved with it was really exciting and one I was really looking forward to. What I'm going to do today is give you a very brief overview of the innovation process that we've established to date, and then maybe talk very briefly about some of the benefits, the challenges and the lessons learned that we've experienced over, for me personally, over the past 2 years. So I suppose firstly, just to give you a bit of context, in order to develop some of the themes that we'd identified through our involvement with Scottish Enterprise's Open Innovation Programme, we created a physical space within the Tontine building, which is known as the Centre for Civic Innovation. So that Centre for Civic Innovation was actually created to help foster a collaborative approach to problem solving, not only within Glasgow City Council, but also between the citizens and local businesses. One of the main benefits about bringing together people from all sectors, including academics, was that the physical space, we felt, helped to stimulate the co-creation of new innovative concepts that could be used to address not only internal issues, but also some of Glasgow's biggest societal .
Sorry guys, I think we've got an audio problem on John's side there. John, can you still hear? Sorry everyone, that's a bit unfortunate that we've cut off there. John had a couple of slides to go through, so if he comes back on, then we can pick up again. But at the moment, I think we'll jump to the Q&A session, and then we'll hear from Sally afterwards on the future of the project and what we're hoping to achieve. So if you have any questions, then please use the chat box to enter if you want to ask any of our presenters anything that they've spoke about today, or if you've got any queries about open innovation or innovation in general. I'll give you a few minutes to type into the chat box. So I'd like to thank Colin, Mollie and John for his brief presentation there. Hopefully he'll join us again and we can hear the rest of his presentation. But if not, we will have a deeper dive of his presentation at a later date. So earlier we mentioned that the webinar will be recorded and we will be sharing that on our YouTube channel, and you can share that with your colleagues and access at a later date. So we do have plans in early 2019 to have a deeper dive into Mollie's experience in Edinburgh and John's experience for Glasgow. So we will share information on that when that becomes available. So that will be in early 2019, probably January or February time. Our presenters will be available to answer any questions following the webinar as well, and we would encourage you to get in touch. So if you want to email anything over, it's info@digitaloffice.scot. We do have up-to-date information on our website, which is digitaloffice.scot also. And if you have any further questions about what we have on our website, want to get involved or want to know any more, then please do get in touch. We also have a section of our website where you can connect with us and you can join our Knowledge Hub, in which we have over 800 colleagues from the digital partnership, and we can link you in with sort of like-minded people or colleagues from other organisations that may be able to support the work that you're doing or you could learn from. So you can sign up via our Connect Us page. So we have a question for Mollie to kick us off here. Mollie, can you give an example of a specific problem that you've addressed through open innovation and what the resolution was?
Sorry, say that again.
Can you give an example of a specific problem that you've addressed through open innovation and what the resolution was?
So there's two projects ongoing in the council just now. One of them is around electrical vehicle charging points using smart technology, renewable energy and battery storage. I've not been involved in that project, but it's now reaching a positive conclusion much earlier than we anticipated, and that was funded through the Can Do Fund as well. So my understanding is that some good solutions have been found in the market with some nominal research and development support to develop them as a workable product, and the council's now going to be taking a view on whether to roll those out. The other project that we are, I wouldn't say at the start of, because there's been an awful lot of, as I mentioned before, problem definition, landscaping, supplier engagement done on it so far, is we have a project called DISC, which is Driver Innovation Safety Challenge, that we are working with Edinburgh Tram on finding a alert solution which will alert the control room to any driver that may be at risk of losing focus or consciousness. I'm sure the audience today doesn't need an explanation as to why we would want to do that. There's lots of solutions available in the marketplace around fatigue and spotting when somebody's about to microsleep. There's the questions around how accurate and real time some of those solutions are. So we're actually going one stage further. So we want that type of solution plus something that's going to detect any other reason that somebody might lose focus or consciousness, and we are trying to do that much more preemptively rather than just reactively, because reactive can be far too late. That project will be getting published as a tender, an innovation partnership tender, at some point early in the new year. We are currently working up the documentation, as alluded to earlier, with some funding from Scottish Enterprise for the innovation partnership piece. It's a very exciting project so far. We have had over 90 notes of interest from the PIN notice for supplier engagement. Some of those companies are in the top 100 companies of the world. Some of them are absolutely tiny and incredibly innovative. We did have one company sent 2 technicians all the way from Singapore for a 1.5 hour discovery meeting because they are so interested in getting involved. So we're pretty confident we're going to get a really good solution out of that. And there is a lot of other organisations watching to see what we can deliver, with the prospect of them buying into that as well. So the scalability is enormous. I hope that answers the question.
That's great. I think the next one may be for Sally. Unfortunately, we won't be able to get Colin and John to answer any of our questions. They're having network issues. So, Sally, one of our attendees is keen to understand how the engagement with those private sector organisations worked. For example, how did you get their buy-in? What challenges was faced, and are you continuing to face? So just from your experience.
That sounds more like a question for Mollie, actually, Siobhan. I would have thought if it's related to what she was saying.
Yep, pass over to Mollie then.
Hi, it's Mollie back. Can you repeat the question?
Yep, so how did you get private sector organisations buy-in, and what challenges was faced, and are you continuing to face?
So with regards to private sector organisations buy-in, so I suppose there's two layers to that. It depends what you mean by private sector organisations. So some of the other transport organisations that are really interested in this are private. Some of them are not. They're set up the same as a lot of us in Scotland, where the local authority owns or partially or solely owns the transport organisation. So getting the buy-in from that front as somebody who's interested in what we're developing and what a supplier could deliver, I think is purely based on safety and some of the issues in the sector, particularly over the last 2 or 3 years, both in Scotland and south of the border. As far as private sector companies getting their interest and buy-in to the challenge, it's quite interesting. We first intended doing supplier engagement and we published the pin notice for that, but it was during the English school holidays. And we got very little response, so we postponed them and we republished the pin notice a couple of weeks later and were absolutely bombarded. So timing is definitely key, and being flexible around that timing as well. So it's definitely paid to do the supplier engagement rather than do nothing and then just suddenly publish an innovation partnership tender. So it was actually quite easy second time around to get private sector buy-in. We gave very clear presentations on what it was we were trying to achieve. We focused very much around the problem and they were to bring the solution. We made it very clear it didn't matter if it was an in-cab solution, something they stuck on the dashboard, if it was a wearable device. The whole principle of an open innovation challenge is you leave the market to bring you the solution. All we did say was it has to be way more than just about measuring fatigue. We can buy that off the shelf. So we made it clear it was that 0.1% icing on the cake, additional functionality that we were looking for, and it was elegantly put. Actually by a supplier, that there's lots of stuff out there, but nobody's actually triangulated anything. They all sit in their own little silos. The market appears to be really keen to actually have a customer base that is interested in a viable solution. So there was a huge interest in collaboration as well and creating consortia. So over a third of those that had noted interest wanted to share their details with everybody else. So we facilitated that for them as well. Does that answer the question, Jackie?
I think that's good, Mollie. I think the pressure is on you today to answer all the questions that we have, to be honest. So the next one, it's kind of a combination of two. What is landscaping within problem definition? And has there been any issues with having to disclose commercially sensitive information as part of your problem definition?
Right, so I'll answer the second part first. you have to treat an innovation partnership procurement just like a competitive dialogue with negotiation or anything like that, where you cannot disclose commercially sensitive information between people, or again between one supplier and another. That's, you know, golden rule. So that part is always going to take a good deal of discipline, and we've not fallen over yet, and we hope that we don't. An explanation of landscaping within problem definition. So I'll give you an idea. We did a couple of days work with Stena Line, who were one of the Scottish Enterprise cohort, and they were doing a training course with some of their core teams who'd identified significant problems, and we were invited along. John was there as well, and it was really, really good. And in a 2-hour block one afternoon, we broke off to do a bit of landscaping around Stena's problems that they had identified. So one of the problems was, how do we make better use of a robot we've just paid X millions of pounds for to assist with our recycling of vehicles? And basically they were thinking, how do we get these vehicles down to their component parts, then we can shred them and dispose of them appropriately or recycle them. And what came out of that was, don't worry about the robot, that's not the problem you've got. So what landscaping does is it takes you through a series of tasks, and one of those tasks is writing your problem out as differently as possible 10 times. And the idea being that you have somebody come into that working group, or a couple of folk that don't know anything about waste management, don't know anything about composite materials or robots, and start asking the really blunt questions because they don't understand. And that project finished up with 4 A4 lists of Google stuff to go away and speak to various organisations about composite materials, how they're built and how they should be subsequently broken down. And it wasn't waste companies that came up as a big piece of interest. It was actually companies like shipbuilding, massive use of composite materials, chemical engineers. We found research data on composite materials being built with breakable points within those materials. So it completely changed where the solution might come from for that particular problem. And that's why landscaping is so hugely important, and that whole process of landscaping. It can turn the problem you thought you had on its head and potentially give you more than one viable solution very, very quickly. That helpful? It's kind of an extreme example, but
that's great. I think we have one more question here from an attendee. Why do you think suppliers are not getting the full ongoing benefits of these type of enterprise initiatives? For example, suppliers not getting the benefits they thought they would get with all other councils joining in. I think you may have touched on that slightly earlier.
I think in the fields of innovation, not everybody's doing innovation in any particularly open way. I think organisations are buying new and innovative things, but they're already out there. If you as a company haven't made an organisation aware or been able to get in the door and say, I've got this great solution for you and it would solve this problem, you're never really going to be looked at as a viable partner. And I can say that having been in the private sector. So I think there's kind of two problems in there. I think the problem that's being described is more of a general supplying into the public sector problem, rather than an innovation, not delivering. I think innovation's not delivering yet because we don't do it particularly open, and we don't do it particularly well because we haven't been given the tools and experience and training to be able to do that. And it's also not necessarily a fast process. And certainly for the DISC project, we do have a dedicated project manager, 30 hours a week for that, and that's not for the procurement element. That's just to manage the size of the project and the level of documentation and recording and controls that are in place. Is that okay?
That's perfect. Thank you very much. We don't have any other questions at the moment, so I think we'll pass over to Sally for the next steps on the project. Again, we're disappointed that John couldn't finish his presentation, but we will pick this up in the new year when we have a deep dive into his experience, and he will cover everything that he was meant to cover today. I'm sure he's more than disappointed himself as well. So Sally will now move on to the summary of the presentation today and the next steps for the Open Innovation project for the digital partnership. And then we will wrap up just in time for 2 o'clock. So without further ado, we will pass over to Sally.
Actually, Siobhan, I was going to ask you just to stick with you where you are at the moment, because I've only got the one slide.
No problem.
Is that okay?
Yep.
So just click on. There we are. Okay, so thanks to everybody that has sat on the call, and I'm really sorry about Glasgow, but as Siobhan said, we are actually going to have an opportunity in the new year to hear the full story from Glasgow. So while we've been talking specifically about open innovation, there are a few other things I wanted to mention as well. Obviously, it's a new project for the Digital Office. We're really keen to hear from councils and to understand how they would like to be involved in the project. I've already had some conversations, so there's quite a lot of interest out there. So you can obviously be looking directly at open innovation. We are going to be working with Civic and doing a workshop in February with them, which will help define challenges with councils. But we are specifically interested in looking at shared problems, things that more than one council, which is not that hard because obviously we're all experiencing the same kind of problems. But the idea behind this project is to look at how we could work together on shared challenges. But as well as that, we also want to hear from councils who perhaps haven't really been looking at innovation in any real depth and want to learn a bit more about it, are interested in how they could develop their own culture around innovation. And for the webinar series, we would also like to showcase examples of innovative solutions to problems or new approaches to problem solving. So that's not necessarily digital. So that's an interesting point there. It's because everything that we do, even on the open innovation path, using a whole range of different skills and tools and approaches, some of which Mollie was talking about earlier, and that will give you that fresh insight, that fresh approach. So we're actually really interested to hear about councils that did things differently. Whether at the end of that meant that they actually were going out to market or they procured a digital solution, or whether in fact they actually just changed a service. That would be really interesting to hear about. So we would like to hear from all these areas from people, and I really hope we're going to get lots of interesting stories. So I'll pass back to Siobhan just to kind of finish up, and if there are any more questions, obviously I'm happy to answer.
Thanks very much, Sally. So as I mentioned earlier on, Sally and Colin are the project leads for the Open Innovation project, which sits under our L05 Digital Transformation Capabilities project. And that sits alongside Lean Six Sigma, service design, and all that. The further information on that is on our website. So we're just going to wrap up just in time here. Again, apologies for not hearing the full of Glasgow's presentation today, and we will share further information on that in the new year. I'd like to thank all 4 of our presenters today, Colin, John, Sally and Mollie, and also Glasgow City Council and the City of Edinburgh Council for giving our colleagues the time to do this for the digital partnership. If you have any further questions or suggestions, or as Sally mentioned, you would like to get involved in the project or share anything that you've been doing within your local authority, then please do email us. We're on info@digitaloffice.scot, and we'll pass that on to Sally or Colin to get in touch with you and progress that. Also, as I mentioned earlier on, we have a knowledge hub of over 800 of our colleagues from the Digital Partnership, and we have lots of information on there, and also a forum to ask any questions you might have on any of our projects. So please do log on and register for that if you're a member of the Digital Partnership. And when doing so, you have to register with a local authority email for you to be identified. So further information on future webinars in early 2019 will be published over the next couple of weeks, and probably in our Christmas newsletter, which you will all receive. And again, anything at all related to this webinar, this project, or any other of the digital partnership projects, then please do just get in touch. So again, thank you to all our presenters, and thank you to all our attendees for joining us today, and we hope to see you on future webinars. Thanks very much.